Been observed that in the realm of politics, decades can pass without any significant change. The status quo will remain unchallenged, and things continue as if they always will. However, in a matter of mere weeks, a condensed decade's worth of political upheaval can quickly transform everything, paving the way for new players, institutions, and a new future. Such is the case with the influential conservative news outlet Daily Wire. For almost 10 years, they were untouchable and able to gatekeep the Overton window and rising stars. If the Daily Wire didn't like you, you were out on the street trying to make it on your own. But in the last 2 weeks, Daily Wire co-CEO Jeremy Boring has been relieved. President Jon Lewis has supposedly stepped down, mass layoffs are underway, and Daily Wire is hiring bankruptcy attorneys. Our guest today, Dominic Tripi, will have all the details on that matter. This episode is brought to you by our premier sponsors, Armored Republic and Reese Fund, as well as our Patreon members and our faithful donors. You can join our Patreon by going to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries, or you can donate by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. So tune in now as we discuss the whole enchilada, the Daily Wire, the death of moderate conservatism, and the brave new world for conservatives as we enter into what media might look like in the near future. Let's go. Welcome back. This is Right Response Ministries. We have our conference. It is coming up this week. We are a mere few days away. On Wednesday, all of our speakers are going to be flying in from all over, and we're going to be doing a speaker dinner that evening, Wednesday, and so I'm excited to talk to them, sit down, get the game plan, and then Thursday, all of our guests are going to be arriving and registering, and so we're super excited about our Christ is King conference, which, by the way, fantastic name. Like sometimes you just, when you're on it, you're on it. You know what I mean? It was a year ago. People were upset about Christ is King, and I couldn't even plan. I mean, God's providence is just so much more infinitely timely and wise than anything that I could, try to plan myself. But I was like, man, Christ is King. No, I'm like, you're going to tell me not to say Christ is King. I'm going to say it even more. In fact, I'm going to name our conference that. And in the providence of God, just like clockwork, just a few weeks before the conference actually happens, the Antichrist is King brigade, Jordan Peterson, I'm looking at you. They hop to it and do what non-Christians do and try to suppress people saying, that Christ is King, and he partners with the ADL. This is literally the same group of guys who were trying to suppress Jordan Peterson himself with his own free speech, and then Jordan Peterson cast his lot in with them against people saying Christ is King. So anyways, the title of the conference, it couldn't be more timely. Christ is King, subtitle, How to Defeat Trash World. Make sure that you go to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. I'll say it one more time, patreon.com/Right Response Ministries, and sign up, become a gold tier member, and you will be able to live stream the conference. At this point, we've got about 1,000 people who are coming in attendance, and it's probably too late for anybody else to hop on and attend in person, but you can get all of the content, 7 main sessions, 3 panels, 10 pieces of content and you can get it all as it's happening live with the live stream by becoming a gold member of our Patreon. Again, patreon.com/Right Response Ministry. So make sure and register and sign up for that today. Without further ado, we have a special guest today. We're going to be talking about the Daily Wire and what's going on with them. It does not look great. Spoiler alert, it's not looking good. But we want to be in this space of true conservative media, culture, and politics, and applying the Scripture to all of life. And so we want to learn a few lessons ourselves. And what's going on? Why is the Daily Wire, that it seemed not that long ago, is such a titan with household names, completely disrupted Fox News and seemed in many ways to take their place on the scene And yet it feels like, Jesus' parable, the four soils, that one is on the rocky soil, it's thin, and it springs up quickly, but then the sun comes out and it withers. And so we want to talk about what's really going on behind the scenes with the Daily Wire, and then our speculation, but then also some application and implications of what does this mean for us? What can we do? How can we be sure to be courageous and to not just take one hill and be content with that and then just try to monopolize, and play it safe, but how can we keep moving the ball down the court in a way that honors God, in a way that is truly America first? So for this task, we have invited, in the cold open, I mispronounced his name, I apologize, but we have invited Dominic Michael Tripi. Dominic, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, very excited to be joining you today. I'm kind of excited. I never wish on the downfall of anyone, but I'm somewhat excited that it seems that there is a shift happening in conservative media, and to me, it's a much needed shift. So really looking forward to talking about it with you guys.
Awesome. So let's go to Wes real quick, and then Dominic, I want Wes to talk, and then I want you to give your thoughts in regards to what Wes says. But for the first segment, we just kind of want to, pretty much everybody knows what the Daily Wire is, but we want to, take a walk down memory lane and maybe some facts and tidbits, that people maybe aren't familiar with, like their rise to status and what really made them and what they stand for today, besides just Israel. What do they stand for? And we'll kind of lay out, first, like, who is the Daily Wire and how did this happen and how did they achieve such a claim so quickly? And that's going to be our first segment. And then we'll go to a commercial break. But after that, we'll really get into some inside baseball, behind the scenes, the reason we brought you on the show today, what's going on.
Yep, absolutely. I have to say, too, so the Daily Wire, their stock might be at an all-time low, but there's individuals within there. I'm thinking Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles. Their stock as creators, commenters, just all-around astute individuals, especially Matt Walsh lately, is really in many ways never been higher. So if you listen to these characters, these individuals, they're on the Daily Wire, and there's a sense of like, but man, where are they going to go? Guys, Matt Walsh leaving Daily Wire could be very similar to the way Tucker left Fox News.
Matt Walsh,
he left and had a bigger platform with more reach and more freedom to interview. So I'm excited for the future. Honestly, I think their time left at the Daily Wire, Dominic, you could comment, but again, honestly, could be measured in days. I don't know if you guys remember the 2008 financial crisis. What's the guy who was Jim Cramer?
Jim Cramer.
Like Bear Stearns is fine. You guys are fine. It's going to come back. Everything looks good. It's like 3 days later, they're practically bankrupt. So we really could be in that type of situation now. I know Ben Shapiro yesterday, Dominique, you can talk about this. He said, we're fine, guys. I've seen the balance sheet. Great things are coming.
Real quick, Daniel Woodard in the chat. I just see him. He's always been encouraging and following our ministry. But Daniel Woodward, he says, USAID money dries up. Daily Wire immediately implodes. Coincidence?
It's true, though. It's true. So to take a walk back down memory lane, like you mentioned, you're actually not even going that far.
Right.
2015, the Daily Wire forms. They filmed some of the first few episodes with Ben Shapiro literally in Jeremy Boring's pool house. It was just kind of a throw together type of thing. And it very, very quickly rose to the status that we know it of today as a household name. It was 2018. So this is about 2 years into the Trump, little less, 2 years into the first Trump administration. And a lot of people were switching from getting their news from cable and from television to the internet, and specifically streaming. So they're streaming video, they're streaming podcasts, and there was a higher barrier to entry at the time as far as cameras, as far as video equipment, as far as even just how many people were actually doing it. The market is a lot more saturated right now. So Daily Wire, really, they came in at the perfect time when people's way of consuming media was shifting. There's a big kind of conservative surge with the first Trump administration. And by 2018, just 2 years in, 3 years after their formation, I mean, they were the number one conservative news source on Facebook. Of all the links shared around and everything going on like that, Daily Wire is the number one. So they quickly rose to stardom. They had a couple very popular movies, one of the big ones being What is a Woman? They were on the front lines of COVID and the front lines of, well, on the front lines of COVID, sometimes not in the best ways. But I mean, they were one of the ones. They went to the Supreme Court to defy the Biden administration when they tried to make companies with more than 50 employees take the vaccine. So they were there. They've been hugely influential, really Matt Walsh specifically, on the trans movement. He testified for bills in Tennessee, made a lot of great moves there. but you're tracing about an 8 to 9 year trajectory. And Dominic, I want to just hand it off to you. If you could maybe give an overview of what's gone on since then. You had Jeremy's Razors, you had, I don't know what they even called it.
Chocolate
company.
Yep. Yeah.
What was it called?
One with nuts, one without. That was their
His and hers.
tagline.
Yeah. So they had a couple of the gimmicks. They've been trying to do these shows because the CEO, Jeremy Boring, our former co-CEO, he's always had a dream of being a movie star, of being a movie director, of being a producer. So he's put a lot of money into that dream. They put a lot of effort, a lot of branding into, like, we're the anti-woke, we're the new media, we're the disruptors. I don't know. Dominic, what would you say the last few years? How is that landing?
Well, they've had quite the trajectory. That's for certain. It seems to me like simply they started spreading themselves too thin as far as other focuses of their business. So, they're primarily known for conservative commentary and for their conservative personalities. Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, obviously, for a time, Candace Owens, Brett Cooper. Now, obviously, the most popular thing that's happened is that Candace Owens has left the Daily Wire along with Brett Cooper, their only female personalities. Subsequently, Candace Owens now has top 5 viewership concerning her podcast, and Ben Shapiro oftentimes is netting almost 10 times less views than Candace Owens, who they so famously and sort of defiantly pushed out. So I think overall what's happened is, they did a couple major feature films. Those obviously cost a great deal of money. They started a children's division and an animated division, which, let's just put it bluntly, it completely flopped. It was a very expensive endeavor and it failed miserably. So I think that ultimately, as the state of their political commentary sort of declined and became somewhat out of touch with the digital consuming audience that they have, I think that unfortunately for them, it's just kind of all caught up to them. And now we're seeing it play out publicly. And it's kind of embarrassing to see the way that they're attempting to cover it up, because even just today with Ian Carroll and this gentleman named James Lee and myself having some tweets about them supposedly hiring a bankruptcy attorney. Notice that today from Ben Shapiro, there was no denial. And the PR employee that they said, or that, was reported exited, indeed admitted today that she resigned or that she was fired. So, and again, it's a PR person, so take whatever she says with a grain of salt. But no, I just think that their mistakes and sort of their overconfidence in their position ultimately led them to where they are today.
Yeah. Let's get into that real quick. We don't have to wait till the second segment. We can just start speculating. What do you think? You said some of their mistakes. I'd like to get your point of view, Dominique. What do you think some of those mistakes are?
Well, and this is something that I've told to many different creators that I've worked with that are working for a larger company. Now, with the proliferation of the ability to stream, and you just mentioned this here a moment ago, it's very easy now for someone just to pick up a camera, get a light. You can learn how to set this stuff up rather easily. And it's not so much in the political media sphere. It's not about the name on the front of the jersey, which, most of the time that's going to be pretty important. You want to be a team player. But now, due to the fact that so many people are able to start their own operation, and also nowadays people are highly more interested in authenticity. That's the only thing that people truly care about, is that they can believe what you're saying. You don't have an agenda, and you're certainly not saying things on behalf of either a foreign country or a lobbying firm or whatever it might be. So I just think that they got completely lost. And what's your opinion?
Yeah, I do think that I think it's a few things. So we talked about this a while ago, but you think of the Reformation. Like, it's not just Luther comes on the scene, but it's also, it's teamed up with the Gutenberg printing press, and all of a sudden it's really hard to have a monopoly on information, and it's hard to have a monopoly on truth, whether it's actual truth or whether you're just deeming it to be truth. But either way, people, all of a sudden, the layman, can set up shop and disseminate information and get his opinions, his point of view across. And so, the Latin Vulgate, most people, were illiterate. They couldn't even speak Latin or understand it, much less read it. But the Catholic Church, Roman Catholicism at the time of Luther had a monopoly. But it wasn't just Luther and his own theological, views, and these these kinds of things, his own charisma, his own personality, his own intellect, but it was teamed up with, with technological innovation, the printing press. So here we are, and yeah, like what Wes was saying, anybody, can set up a studio in their mom's garage.
I'll give one more. Billy Graham and television.
Yep.
He was right there, and he became the first televised televangelist. Became a household name. I mean, there's a statue of him now.
John MacArthur, and cassette tapes, and right. all these, and radio. And so at each leg of technological innovation, new players, early adopters come on the scene. And by virtue of being an early adopter, like there are some intrinsic rewards that they experience, but not in perpetuity. They have to eventually defend it and keep it by substance, by actual merit. And so I think, the Daily Wire was an early adopter. They had some good insight, good strategy. They came on the scene with podcasting and those things early, and that helped them tremendously. But at this point, that's not enough. So I think part of it is just the competition that, for a while it's like, well, to get cameras and to get, equipment and to get all these things and to stream and blah, blah. But now it's not that hard. Anybody can do it. And so I think part of it is just the rise of competition. But two, I really do think that both for the political left and the political right, for their, respective reasons, they don't have the same reasons, but pretty much universally at this point, everybody, 45 years old and under, is kind of like, it's pretty much gone mainstream, between Ian Carroll and Joe Rogan, and then you've got Daryl Cooper and Tucker Carlson, our guy Boniface Option, Andrew Isker, today is on Tucker Carlson. And so at this point, the J pill has been taken by pretty much everybody under the age of 45. And so my point is, you don't have to come to the same conclusions. You don't have to, there's a sliding scale of different opinions and conclusions and what does this mean? But if somebody is not ever critical of Israel at all, I think that a willingness to be critical towards our greatest ally, TM, a willingness to be critical of Israel has become in many ways the universal litmus test of whether or not somebody is trustworthy. And right or wrong, and I do think it's right, but right or wrong, that's the way it is. Like boomers are going to be gone very soon. They're not going to be here forever. They may harvest some organs and build a base on the moon, and I don't know. Maybe they squeeze out another 150 years, knowing the boomers, they'll find a way. But barring that, the boomers will be gone eventually. We've been saying that for like 50 years. They're still here, but they will be gone eventually. And honestly, man, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, like everyone, like people, if they're on the left, if they're on the right, like if there is anything that pretty much everybody's on board with, it's, right. We're not a big fan of Israel. So I think part of it is, yes, the competition because of, technological innovation, everybody can have a podcast. But I think also part of it is people are like, dude, if you're sitting here telling me, well, does it really matter who killed JFK? It happened 60 years ago. It's not a big deal. Oh, but by the way, there's something that happened 80 years ago, and it's a super big deal. Let's go back to my main point, the Holocaust. Like, young people
that was a real article for the record that Ben Shapiro wrote. Mm-hmm. Does it really matter who killed JFK?
Right, no, I'm not
being... popular presidents we had, precipitated the Civil Rights Act, because Johnson
that literally was
rode
Ben
the
Shapiro's
backs of it.
His take was, you know what? It really doesn't matter who killed JFK. And it's like, well, no, it kind of does matter. And so anyway, so I think those two things. I think, one, everybody can have a podcast. There's just more competition. I think we're going to see more and more decentralizing. I think the day of the celebrity in conservative media is probably coming to an end. I think you'll have some guys who already achieved it and they'll be able to live out, the rest of their career. Guys like Tucker Carlson, guys like Charlie Kirk. But I think for a lot of other guys, there's just too much competition. But secondly, I think part of the reason why Tucker is going to be able to stay around is because he's willing to at least scratch the surface and have some of these kinds of conversations that other guys aren't willing to have. And I really, again, I think universally across the board, if you're 45 years or younger, even you could argue even 50 or younger, if you're on the left, if you're on the right, if you're a moderate, a centrist, like across the board universally, everybody pretty much agrees with one thing. And that one thing is Israel is they've done some things,
Right.
And if somebody is unwilling to criticize Israel at all, people immediately, they instinctively think, even if they're wrong, they think this guy's bought and paid for.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dominic?
Well, I think that you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, truthfully, if we're really going to analyze the division that we're witnessing on the right, I mean, it has picked up speed with October 7th like you would never believe. I mean, many of these discussions that people are having, even like the discussion that Daryl Cooper had with Tucker Carlson, do you really think that would be an acceptable conversation prior to October 7th? I certainly do not. I mean, this, as far as advancing the ball down the field, when discussing uncomfortable or inconvenient truths about Israel and the associated group of people and their influence on the United States, I mean, it's been very noticeable that the Daily Wire has made a very distinctive effort to gatekeep or completely illegitimize any of that information that's coming out. And actually, Joel, something that you mentioned on one of your previous episodes, you referred to it as the woke war one or something along those lines. And I believe that you were focusing on issues of like transgenderism, of sexual degeneracy, of some other issues that were very easy for us as conservatives to attack from a right-wing perspective. Now, what you're basically witnessing is that, for all intents and purposes, it seems that we've kind of won that war in the court of public opinion. It is not profitable to be supporting those ideas. It is not popular. If people continue to push those ideologies, they basically get not blacklisted, but people don't like them. It's not getting views. It's not getting attention. Daily Wire was built in order to combat that sort of extreme leftism. Right. But what you're seeing now, and this is especially picked up since Donald Trump has won the election, but you're seeing lots of infighting actually on the right, and it's due almost 100% primarily due to this whole sort of Israel divide that's happening. And so Ben Shapiro and the ownership group of Daily Wire has made no secrets about their affiliation. The fact that he's even said the words, the main reason I support Donald Trump is because of his commitment to Israel. And when you have people that are supposed to be influential figures saying that to a digital media audience who, like you said, is primarily under 45, and almost none of them want to hear that anymore, it screams inauthenticity. It screams straight up lying. And I think that I don't think they're going to be able to get out from under this. I don't think there's any chance.
I agree. Yeah, I think that at this point, people have seen a little bit too much. Like they've peeked behind the curtain, and like I said, like not everybody's going to come to the same conclusion. Some guys are going to go further than others. Some people are going to say, well, Israel certainly shouldn't be our ally, and then other people are going to say, and also the Jews are responsible for everything. So like there's a lot of wiggle room in between those positions, and people will land at different places on this scale. But to take the position of Israel is our greatest ally, they can do no wrong, and it's great that we have a ton of federally elected individuals with dual citizenship, like that position is just indefensible at this point. People have seen too much. It's just not going to work out. And
they,
like
even
we said,
I was going to say, financially, like it's one thing of like, well, we got this person on our team, they contribute, we don't agree, and we'll push back publicly. But Candace Owens, it was the feud with her and Ben Shapiro that led to her departure. You're letting someone go out the door. Supposedly her and Brett Cooper were two of the last really profitable shows they had, willing to see hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars walk out the door over your opinion on that. That's when it goes from, hey, we're all under one roof. I think The Blaze does this really well. They have a bunch of different contributors who have different views, but they're not trying to gatekeep. We're not trying to say like, hey, you're on our network, you can't say X, Y, and Z. Hey, we've got our differences, but as long as you sign this contract, you're producing, you're doing all of that, no big deal. Daily Wire said, we'll let millions of dollars, we'll let your influence walk out the door over this single issue, legitimately. We can have differences on other things, but if you're not down with this, we're content to see you walk. And I mean, like, you can't be mad when you make that your test and the money walks away and it keeps walking away.
And I think that's the name of the game. So Dominic, I agree with you 100%. That's kind of the lingo that me and some of our constituents have been using is woke wars 1, woke wars 2. I think there's a lot of guys on the right who they fought valiantly. We're grateful for what they did. They were like, social justice is a scam, wokeness is a scam, CRT is a scam, all these kinds of things. But really, at the end of the day, that's like their commitment is still to 20th century liberalism. There's a difference. I tweeted out the other day. I said, historic Christianity is greater than 20th century liberalism wearing a Christian skin suit. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're finding, I think that's the dividing line today, right? There's a ton of different issues. Israel's one of them. What is an American is one of them. Heritage America, like H-1B visas, all the way down immigration, who should be able to vote, there's a million different issues. Feminism, the 19th Amendment, there's all these different things. But if I was to sum it up, right, because a lot of people want to know, where are the battle lines? What is it? What is it? If you could sum it up, give it a central rallying cry. Basically, I think the battle today is historic Christianity versus 20th century liberalism wearing a Christian skin suit. That's what it is. Because for the longest time, I tried to make it more ideological. And for me, because I'm a pastor, I tried to for me, the ideology would have been theology. And so for me, I was like, well, it's eschatology. There's guys who are pessimistic in their eschatology, they're dispensational pre-mill, and, they've just checked out of the culture war because Jesus is going to come back next Thursday. And then there's post-millennial guys. And I tried to think like it's that, there's got to be some theological reason. But then, a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you realize, that's actually not it, because there's guys who are post-millennial, but in their day-to-day life, in terms of their active strategy, and their mission, their post-millennialism, all it amounts to at the end of the day is, yes, Christ will win gradually and progressively, not despite a losing church, but through the church, and he will do it thoroughly, successfully in 50,000 years. But for now, we need to support our greatest ally, and I'm like,
5 more billion to Israel.
And so it turns out that like post-millennial, you can be post-millennial and still be a Zionist, 100%. And so anyway, so I'm looking at these things and I'm realizing, okay, this is what it comes down to. Who likes John Calvin and who would excommunicate Calvin? Who likes Athanasius and who would excommunicate Athanasius? Who likes, who will take lead tours of a bunch of Reformed Christians, and go and visit Luther's graveside, but also, if Luther was alive today, would excommunicate Luther, and that's basically what I realized is like, okay, when it comes to picking your team, I decided like, I think I want to be on the team of the guys who aren't just agreeing with the soteriology of Luther or Calvin or whatever, but who actually think that, that maybe there were real Christians before the 1940s. And I think that's the dividing line. So the woke war won. They were like, yeah, let's get back to the 1980s, the good old years. And they're just content to do that. That's enough for them. Woke War II is guys who are like, no, we haven't won yet. That's a victory. We're grateful for it, but we still need to push the ball forward. They're the guys who are asking questions like, what is an American? And Joel Berry's of the world are like, well, anyone who has American citizenship. And it's like, but we wouldn't speak that way with any other country. I could attain Japanese citizenship, probably not, but maybe they'd let me do it, but I'd never be Japanese. And it's like, well, that's because it's Japan, that's different. They're Asian. Well, you could do the same thing in Europe. Like I could attain French citizenship. I'll never be a Frenchman. I never will be. I'll never be a Brit, and so. But in America, anyone from anywhere, like it's like there's two people in the world, two categories. There are Americans and potential Americans. Who lives in India? 1.3 billion potential Americans live in India. That, and I think a lot of people are like, that is insane. That's ridiculous. Nobody ever thought this way. No one in all of human history ever thought this way. It's not even just historic Christianity at this point. It's just historic humanity. Pagans didn't think this way. Muslims didn't think this way. Nobody has thought this way ever. And some guys are just like the James Lindsays of the world. They didn't like wokeness. The reason they fought in Woke Wars 1 is because they didn't want to be replaced by minorities in the halls of academia.
Right.
That's all it was for them. For them, it was literally just securing their job. But for others of us, we're like, no, like we actually want to secure, the potential and the freedom and the jobs, and the heritage, not just for ourselves, but for our children's children. We want to fight a little further. We want to go a little further. And so everything is just fracturing. And I think it's going to continue to. So all that being said, the last thing I was going to mention is I think the name of the game right now is back to what you were saying, Wes. Blaze has its own problems. But here's the thing with Blaze, it's you can point to, it's less institutional. There are some institutional stuff, but it's more like this, this contributor, but I like this contributor and I like this contributor. And I think that the model that the Blaze has, like for one, it's like 40, 50 different contributors, and I can name 5 of them. So that model versus Daily Wire. And the biggest thing is not gatekeeping and not trying to steamroll and centralize everything. And so what I think moving forward is we're probably going to have a lot of smaller voices, and people are just, it's going to be decentralized. Everybody's going to have their guy. I listen to Joel. I listen to Isker. I listen to this guy. I listen to that guy. You're going to have a lot of that. And you still need, you need comrades in arms. You still need that. That's inescapable. But I think loose coalitions is the name of the game, where you can have friendship, real friendship, and not have friendly fire, not turn on each other, and try to destroy each other because you disagree on one issue. So loose coalitions that are working towards the same general thing, but then you have to iron out what is that general thing. And I think if you could sum it up, it's liberalism. Liberalism has to die. We have to beat 20th century liberalism. I'll give you the final word, Dominique, and then we'll go to a commercial break.
So just one last point regarding the troubles that Daily Wire is experiencing. I think one of the foundational reasons for, we'll call it their downfall, is just the sheer hypocrisy in which they operate. I mean, these are the people that very famously espoused facts are not your feelings. But then all of a sudden, when we try to bring up completely unbiased and really not any facts that have any ulterior motives in stating them, they immediately just try to discredit, smear, and essentially slander anyone that brings them up. So I just think that the fact that, they so defiantly were talking about that only facts dictate the truth and only facts are going to be our guiding light, for them to so outwardly ignore many of the things that people are seeing in front of their eyes, like the fact that we've created a task force for October 7th when we're not even the country that was affected by it. We created a task force for anti-Semitism on college campuses where we're deporting people that are legally here, even though I don't necessarily want them to be here to begin with. The excuse for deporting them, instead of actively trying to deport the 40 or up to 50 million illegal immigrants that are here in the United States today, it just shows that they're out of touch. And they appear, is it that they're out of touch, or that they're naive, or is it that they're being intentionally deceptive? And I believe that it's the latter.
I agree. All right, let's go to our first commercial break, and then we will be right back. Our sponsor, Private Family Banking, wants to help you with one money move that'll implicate itself in multi-generational wealth building starting the first day. They help you to avoid taxation and to draw compound interest to your money. Now, if you're a high net worth individual, someone who has maybe even $10 million in net worth, then they can help you even more. W-2 workers, contract workers, business owners, it's all about cash flow and making tax-deferred gains on all your money for the rest of your life. Don't avoid this. It's a big move, but it's a great time to make it. Click the link below and you can get on Chuck DeLauterante's calendar, and he'll go over your background and what you want to accomplish. And he's going to help model a program that exactly fits your needs. So go ahead and send an email to chuck@privatefamilybanking.com. Again, that's chuck@privatefamilybanking.com, or you can click the link below. Make a free discovery call now.
America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reese Fund exists in order to see the Ten Commandments properly applied, not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reese Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.
All right, welcome back. Dominic, all you tweeted out over the weekend, you're hearing it, that the Daily Wire is apparently looking at bankruptcy attorneys. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I actually have a bit of a friendship with Ian Carroll, and I also have a bit of a friendship with one of these reporters that he called out Brett Cooper leaving 2 weeks before it happened. He called out Jeremy Boring leaving before it actually happened. He's a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Lee. And so he, on private channels, was telling me that there was turmoil, that they were thinking about firing their public relations director, who supposedly is very chummy with Jeremy Boring and also contributed to some of the toxic culture that we hear about there. But, excuse me. But basically, I had heard that there was troubles, and I reached out to a couple other people that I knew had sources there, and they told me that it was quite a bit worse than people actually knew, and that they were looking at officially hiring a bankruptcy attorney, or not that they were looking to, but they officially did hire a bankruptcy attorney. And I will say allegedly, because I'm unable to confirm that other than through this source, although Daily Wire has not denied it. But yeah, I mean, basically we found out that it's just cascading the issues they've had over the last several weeks that we've learned about, that culminated in Jeremy leaving. And then we started to kind of go through the fact about the animation department, about the fact that 25% of their staff was being laid off. And so the bankruptcy attorney was allegedly hired because, I mean, it appears they're going through a formal restructuring. And I mean, that it does make a bit of sense considering the fact that they did let two of their most profitable creators go by far. Right. But I will say, you know, in 2023, now it's a private company, so these financials are not public, but Axios reported that they were their valuation was north of $1 billion. And then also in May of 2024, Axios also reported that they made over $23 million just in commerce in 2023. So they certainly have made money. And I think it speaks to just the severity of some of these decisions that Jeremy Boring made, especially with his ventures into trying to create major Hollywood films and these animated series like I touched on. I think that there was just totally unscrupulous, terrible financial decisions made. And yeah, that's what's happening now.
Can you tell us, Dominic, real quick, honing on Jeremy? So we did an episode talking, you know, when he first announced, or it was announced that he was going to be stepping down as co-CEO. But I've heard a thing or two, but I don't feel comfortable saying anything because I can't confirm. And if you don't feel comfortable either because you can't confirm, but if you have anything that you feel like is fairly, you know, reliable, I've heard that it on one level it's the financial decisions of, okay, you've got a political, cultural, you know, pundit media business, which yes, we do need good conservative art and media and entertainment and stuff for kids. Like I agree with that vision, but you have to know what you have. You know what I mean? You have to know what you have. And the Daily Wire is predominantly it's Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan. You know, talking about, you know, it's a daily show. It's a daily show on politics. That's what it is. And it's one thing to say, you know, this is our bread and butter. This is what, you know, what brings home the bacon and how everybody gets paid. This is what's viable. And but we're going to put a little bit aside and we're going to try to make, you know, one good film, you know, or we're going to try to make a program, a TV show for kids. But it's a whole other thing to say we're going to spend, you know, $100 million in the course of just a few years, you know, producing Hollywood level films, which will all have a female protagonist. You know, there'll be good conservative films, except everything you would imagine a young man doing, it'll be a chick, because we're not that conservative, so run, hide, fight, whatever. But to do it at that level, it did kind of seem like at some point it felt like it's one thing to do this on the side, but remember what your main business model is, like what the Daily Wire is. But then at a certain point, it felt like now Ben Shapiro and Walsh and Knowles, the Daily Show, the daily political analysis just exists to fund Jeremy's kind of Hollywood career. Like I grew up in like more charismatic churches, and you always had those guys on the worship band. It's like this guy clearly, like, his dream was to be like in a rock band,
right?
And Sunday morning worship team is his way of trying to fulfill that. He's like we're singing a song and then he's like ripping like a guitar solo, and it's like it's a little bit too much. And so it seems like that's kind of what Jeremy was doing. So one, just the business model of like, is the Daily Wire just your stepping stone for fulfilling your Hollywood dream? And then second thing is, I have heard. But I want to give it to you, Dominique. But I have heard that interacting with Jeremy Boring wasn't necessarily a picnic, just personality-wise. Is there anything that you can say from your sources that would be reliable in either of those arenas?
Absolutely. So I'll just say who said it, because he has said it publicly as well. But a journalist friend of mine, Jeremy Lee, he has said that sources within the Daily Wire that actually worked there said that Jeremy Boring was one of the biggest prima donnas, basically a terrible guy, extremely difficult to work with, someone that caused division within their office where people are taking sides. Are you on Jeremy's team? Are you on Matt Walsh's team? That type of situation. And exactly what you said about sort of his illusions of grandeur as far as being a Hollywood star or whatever his aspirations were. I think that's very evident just in the way that not only the many different projects that he attempted to do, which he was featured in, but also, quite frankly, and not to personally insult the guy, but he just appeared to be unnatural on camera, like he was forcing it anyways, like he was trying to force this dry humor and trying to force himself to be someone that was deserving of having an on-camera opportunity. And I just don't think the guy was really that likable. I don't think he was really that talented. And I think that actually bled over to some of his business decisions. And of course, I don't know their precise financials, but I know that plenty of people have gone on record saying that he is not a good person to deal with, and that frankly, he's stupid as far as many of his aims. So there is validity to those claims 100%. And I think that you're actually going to hear some more about that from Candace Owens this week, because when the PR director admitted that she resigned, I saw that Candace actually went after a bit and said, well, now I'm no longer contractually obligated to keep secrets about you if you're no longer part of the company. So thank you very much for admitting it publicly. So I think you're going to see much more about this. Let's be honest, guys. When there's smoke, there's fire, and we're seeing a heck of a lot of smoke right now.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think, just from an outsider perspective, God King is a pretty bold nickname. I mean, to be fair,
sensible Christian.
For an evangelical Christian, let's be fair, lowercase g, right, lowercase k, but still, and you mentioned likable. I got to say this because it's just way too relevant for myself. So elephant in the room. Even last night, my wife and I, the last week, I've gotten so many. I don't know if you know this, Dominique. There's a lot of people who don't like me. So you mentioned likability, and it's like I'm not that likable. Wes, we're friends. We hang out a lot.
I like you.
Okay, Wes
you got one.
But here's the thing: Wes likes me, but he's like autistic. So there's a few.
He's like, but you're the same thing as me.
Yeah, he's like, you're weird, I'm weird.
Yep.
So Michael likes me, but both of them are paid to like me, But let's be real, not paid very much. So it's
I don't want I don't want to cut you off, but you're most
Go ahead.
certainly likable. You're just not likable to people that despise the truth, especially ones that are inconvenient, especially ones that kind of shake you up when you say, hey, you know, this is a Christian country and these are the steps that we need to take. These are the people that should be voting. This is the traditional family structure we need to have. Women deserve a secondary role because that's what God intended. And I think that many of the things that you say, those were the norm.
They were the norm.
Decades, for hundreds of years,
like I'm sitting here
throughout the world. And the fact that these people ignore the truth that's right in front of their eyes that they know, are they really so naive, or are they really so overconfident to think that they are smarter than everyone over the course of human history? I do not. I think you're very likable, and there was a reason why I was excited to join the show today. So just keep doing what you're doing, man. Sorry to cut you off. But
no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That's super encouraging. Super encouraging. I need that. Thank you. But that's what I think. You know, like it's funny because I describe myself to a lot of people as I honestly like Wes will tell you, like I'm a moderate. I'm kind of squishy.
Sometimes I'm like, what is this?
Like I'll tweet things out, and Wes will just straight up I gotta defend my boy Wes, you know, because some guy I'll tweet things out. Yesterday I tweeted something, metrics for who should be allowed,
which
to
was
vote.
a quote of Matt Walsh, who was doing a great job out there.
So Matt Walsh he tweeted something. I thought it was pretty good. Pretty good, you know. I'm proud of him. He's baby steps, and so he was like, these are the people who should vote. You know, you should be married. You should be this. You should be that. It was
not taking welfare.
Yeah, not taking welfare, paying taxes, and be married. Those kind of things. And I was like, hey, that's a good start. And so then I tweeted out my version. I just retweeted him and I said, you should be a third generation American, and you should. Not take welfare.
Christian,
I agree with that.
Well.
Christian. You should be Christian. You should be white. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. But third generation American. You should be Christian. You should be what else did I say, Wes?
Male.
Male. Yep. So head of household. You should be male. Repeal the 19th. Right. I think that's a moderate position. I think. So I just said typical moderate things. Right. And Wes, guys are like swarming Wes, offline, guys who follow the show, and they're like, Wes, come get your boy.
What is this?
Look at this squish. This squish, third generation, try 10th
generation. And then maybe you
can get half of a vote. And so anyways, but my point is that, I get a lot of flack. I get emails. I got an email, from somebody today, because things, they go viral and then they die off and they go viral again. And somebody was like, you think, no, it was my parents. My parents were like, a friend of theirs was like, yeah, we saw Joel and we love Joel. We love you guys. But we were a little concerned that he said that ultimately what would stop the Me Too movement is just a few executions. And I did say that. That's true. But I said it in context. I said, look, this is the book of Deuteronomy. This is just scripture, that whatever the charge is that you're levying towards someone else, whatever the penalty would be if they were found guilty, if it turns out that you're lying in a court of law, then the same penalty that would have fallen on their head falls on your head, right? And the biblical penalty for RAPE is death. And if it turns out you're lying about that, then death would be the penalty that you would get. Very moderate position. Super, super chill
eye
position.
For an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a
justice.
tooth, life for a life. Yeah, so this is like basic Christianity. Everybody, held to these kinds of views not that long ago. But people lose their minds. So anyways, but back to likable. My wife and I were talking, last night. And she was like, Joel, you're always in trouble. I love you. We'll sit down, we'll watch full episodes together so that, because the clip will go viral so she can get the context. And she's like, yeah, I agree with that. And she was like, is there anything you can do? And I was like, sweetheart, I don't know if there is, because at the end of the day, like Brian Sauvé has a handlebar mustache, writes love songs about his daughters.
Right.
You know what I mean? And is chuckling, and has this ongoing, rapport and with Ben, and some people are just going to be more likable than others. And so my point in all that, as it pertains to our topic today with Jeremy, is I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic if a guy's just not likable. But there's a difference in the random person on the other side of the world watching your content not liking you because they're a leftist, or a Reformed Christian, but I'm being redundant at this point. But like they're a leftist, and they hate your position, and therefore they don't like you. But there's
like Dominic is saying.
But there's another level when it's like when somebody in house doesn't like you. Like lots of people don't like Joel Webbon, but people in our church, like Michael, you're like, yeah, Joel, sometimes you're a little spicy, but Michael knows me, Wes knows me, the members of our church know me. So when somebody digs up, my sin, real sin, but from 12 and a half years ago, our church doesn't bat an eye. They're like, we know you, you're like, people think I'm arrogant, but they're like, even the clips that go viral is like, I'm the best we got. Our church was there for the sermon. They're like, yeah, that came on the heels of 10 minutes of you talking about how retarded you are and how like the Christendom that you're working towards, you wouldn't even be able to be licensed to preach. Right. Like
not even youth pastor.
Right. I'm not even allowed to be a youth pastor in the Christendom, the ideal that I'm working towards. And all that was in the sermon. But 30 seconds gets deceitfully clipped out. So people in my orbit, this is the point, people in my orbit, my wife, my kids, my parents who are members in our church, Michael, Wes, all the other members in our church, our board, 80 Robles, they're all like they are constantly telling me, Joel, maybe confess to a few less people, and maybe don't talk about how dumb you are, and share like your IQ with every like you're too authentic, you're too honest, and sometimes you beat yourself up a little bit too much. Everybody else in the internet world, they're like, he's a jerk, he's full of himself, whatever. But for Jeremy, it seems like, from what I hear, it seems like it's the opposite. And that, I think, is when there's a problem. When outside, the people who don't know you, who are just watching Lady Ballers or whatever, they're like, hey, he seems like a great guy. But everyone who knows you is like, he wouldn't stand up for us. I feel underpaid. He won't listen to our view. He like... That, to me, that's what's most concerning. Doug Wilson has said this in the past, and I think he's absolutely right. A man's greatest credentials is the laughter at his family dinner table. Do your kids love you?
Right.
Does your wife love you? Do the people who actually know you, who really know you,
who work for you, your duty to them as their boss, as the president? Right.
Like my whole life, and it's all the grace of God. It's not me, but by the grace of God, my whole life has been... Nathan, you can vouch for that. My whole life has been being underpaid because I keep giving other people too much money. That's pretty much my entire life. I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to take care of you. Hey, I want to take care of you. Like right now, I'm actively thinking like, can I take half of my salary with the church so that we can pay other elders to shepherd the sheep more thoroughly? That's just how I think. From what I hear, that is not how Jeremy Boring thinks. Dominic, any thoughts?
Something as far as his likability or favorability goes, I just want to remind people, like, it's not like there's some isolated incident, like just a few weeks ago, people decided, oh, hey, Jeremy Boring's a bad guy. I mean, you remember as far back as the whole Steven Crowder thing, he had very terrible things to say about Jeremy Boring and the entire company, and he was not tied to an NDA. And then, of course, you see the whole thing with Candace Owens, and yes, that was mostly Ben Shapiro. But the weirdest thing about it all was that like forced episode that Jeremy did with Brett Cooper whenever she exited the company. And it was like weirdly edited, very strange. Oh, we have whatever her producer's name replacing Brett. And it was just so awkward to where, the examples that we're discussing as far as this guy being outwardly unlikable, I mean, they are well documented. And so at this point, I'm not too sure that we even need to throw things like allegedly around. I think the guy's quite difficult to work with, and he's just straight up unlikable. So as far as the stuff with you, though, Joel, I think this whole shift that we're speaking about, as far as at least in the political right-wing media sphere, I think that voices like yours who sort of espouse the sense of authenticity and just being unafraid, this is the direction that we're going. And actually, to go back to something that Wes said at the beginning of the show, he was saying that he was thinking that perhaps Matt Walsh's time at the Daily Wire, remaining time, could be measured in days. And yeah, I think something's very interesting. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but his content has intensified in its nature quite a bit. even the quote tweet that you were talking about of your own, Joel, I mean, he would not say something like that even like a month or two ago. So I think if there's any sign that's very indicative of the fact that the Daily Wire is experiencing certainly some kind of trouble, it's very evident in Matt Walsh's recent transformation, which I love. I love it. I think he's a very talented guy.
I'm here for it. He's very talented. And talk about in terms of likability, it's ironic, because his whole shtick is kind of like the dry humor. I never smile. Yeah, exactly. But that's actually really likable. Yeah. Matt Walsh, I think, like his whole 10-minute spiel, like I don't even tune into Matt Walsh for politics. I will occasionally watch a clip, like when I'm thinking I want to watch some Matt Walsh. I want to hear about this Waffles goat.
Who he's canceling.
Right. He's canceling his wife.
That's right.
Because of Waffles the goat.
That's right.
And so so it's like all of his, political commentary, cultural commentary. I'm like, I got better guys,
right.
like who, they'll be a little bit, harder in the paint, but Matt Walsh is actually ironically super likable. So I just want to hear his 10-minute shtick about how they adopted this goat and how he,
his wife adopted it against his will.
And now all of a sudden he has two goats and he's like, I know I have a beard. All of a sudden they think I'm Noah, and that 2x2, every animal.
Am I Racist was hilarious.
It was
it wasn't informative as in I learned so much. It was
that
the normies would have been informed, I think.
That movie was not like I'm going to go learn about, race and what Christians thought about it. And it didn't even necessarily push the ball down the court in terms of what is an American and that ethnicity actually does have something to play. You can't just take 500 Haitians and drop them off in a small town in Ohio and call them American in 15 minutes. It takes time. And none of it was academic. None of it was pushing the ball down the court in that regard, answering some of the serious questions. But it was just good entertainment. He actually is likable. He's got a brand, and it's not just a brand, it's him. It's authentic, it's real, it's Matt. And people love it. I love it. And so, but that said, he's coming out. He's being a little bit more forceful, being a little bit more bold. But it's funny. Anytime somebody points it out, I don't know if you guys have noticed it on X, but he's kind of defensive about it. He's like, "I've always said this. I've always said, no, this isn't a recent development. I've always been based. I've always, And here's the thing. I think that's true. In Matt's defense, I think that's true. But I think it's been a while. I think two things can be true at once. I don't think it's the first time that Matt has said these kinds of things like nobody should have dual citizenship. And then immediately, in the comment section, people are like, that includes Israel, Matt. And then Matt, pipes back right away and says, yes. Did I stutter? Yeah, it does include Israel. And people are like, first time I'm hearing you say this, Matt. And he's like, I've said this before.
He said that. He wrote that in 2013.
Exactly. And that's my point. So I think, how can you resolve these two things? I don't think Matt's lying. I think he has said these things before. But I think he hasn't said them in a while. That's what so I do think
before
that these
joining the Daily Wire.
Before joining the Daily Wire,
2017,
exactly.
2018.
So that's my point. Is I don't think that Matt is all of a sudden just seeing the writing on the wall and it's inauthentic and I'm going to be more based because I'm realizing that the moderate centrists like Joel Webbin are passing away and I've got to make a name for myself and so I got to go a little bit harder. No, I actually don't. I don't think it's inauthentic. I think it is true to who Matt really is. But it's a side of Matt that is Matt, but has been kind of put on pause. So I don't think it's like all of a sudden he's more based. Well, I think he has been that way, but I think he did suppress a couple topics for a while, and now he's like, nah, I'm just going to go for it.
Well, just because I do not like to speculate, and so I'm the charitable read on that would be we were fighting some pretty big dragons for those couple of years too.
Yep.
No one was really even thinking about whether we need to be talking about, very few people were. The people that were way ahead of the curve were talking about whether we are overly connected to Israel in everything. But there were some legitimate things that were taking a lot of someone like Matt Walsh's time and effort.
You're right.
And so there's a charitable thing besides, because that also casts him in a light where it kind of besmirches him a little bit to say, well, even if you knew that, you were selling out a little bit, right? And maybe he was, and maybe he wasn't. We don't know. But
yeah, I can't say that. You're right. Yeah. We should be careful. I can't say that. I don't know. So you're right. That's helpful. The most charitable approach would be 2019, 2020, 2021, that he was going hard on some issues that at that moment were formidable. they like at that moment, DEI looked like it was going to win the day, right? Transgenderism looked like it was going to win the day. And so it's perfectly acceptable for him to say, you know what, I'm going to go hard on these issues. Nobody has to, like, we have to keep, nobody has a moral obligation to be prolific. Nobody has to be an expert in everything. It is perfectly acceptable. Like there's some YouTube channels where it's like the guy just talks about one thing over and over and over again. And sometimes he'll get flack and people will be like, why don't you talk about this? And it's like, well, that's not what I do. And that's okay. It's okay to I'm going to make, 2 or 3 things my bread and butter, and I'm just going to go hard on these things. And so that is the most charitable take, and I'm happy to give that charity to Matt and say that it wasn't just, in a back room. He's he got the call from Ben Shapiro. Best most charitable take that we can say is that in 2020, 2021, like we were in Woke Wars 1. And in Woke Wars 1, the most pressing issue was are we ever going to hire white people again? And are all of our planes going to be flown by female black lesbians who aren't qualified, and is everyone going to die? Right. Like that was a real question in 2021. And we're seeing the fruit of it now, but a lot of that battle, there's still the implications rolling out, but a lot of the battle has been won, praise God. And so maybe we could say, that was the focus, and now he's able to focus on other things. All right, so what I want to do is go ahead.
Ask Dominique, what do you see as what to look for next for the
That's
Daily Wire?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, perfect.
Now let's talk Daily Wire, but let's talk broader than that. Let's talk like for ourselves. Let's talk for Dominique, but let's just talk like moving into the future. Who's going to make it, and what's going to be what is the quintessential? You've got to what's the dividing line? What is going to make it or break it for media as we move into the future?
So, as far as what I anticipate, as far as the Daily Wire is concerned, I think that there are a lot of interests that want to keep a Daily Wire around. You can assume what interests those might be, but it is a fairly large company with a fairly large reputation. It would be a very big public loss for them to go down and it be very visible for people. So I don't think that they're going to go fully belly up. I think there likely could be some significant company restructuring because it does appear evident that they had some very poor financial decisions being made. I think that Matt Walsh is going to leave the Daily Wire before the end of the summer. And the reason why is because I think that he senses the direction that the wind is blowing. I think that the main separators as far as conservative commentary are concerned are people that still actually speak and uphold conservative Christian values, people that actually talk about Christianity, people that actually talk about things like race, people that actually talk about things like Israel. And I do understand that oftentimes, you see, especially like the Trump administration, they discourage every single conversation about that. When's the last time you've heard any of these major figures speak about like the assault on white people going across the entire world? Places like London were 90% white in 1970. Now it's 35%. Even America, in 1950, we were 89.5% white. Today, it's something like 59%. So you used to hear those sort of talking points prior to Trump winning the election. Now you're not hearing them at all because everyone's just saying, oh, if you're too far, if you're hitting us from the right, you're not part of the team and we're going to try to ostracize you. So I think ultimately, Matt is going to be guided by truth and justice. I think he made some money for a while. I think maybe he decided to not emphasize certain points for quite some time. I think he's a good man, though, and I think that ultimately, the statement, the truth will set you free, I think he's due for a healthy scoop of freedom here soon. That's my prediction.
Yep. Do you have a background in law and bankruptcy just to be able to kind of explain when a company files Chapter 11, what kind of actually goes on, the way they cut departments, the way they move things around, new owners could come in? Are you able to explain that? I don't want to put you on the spot if you'd be forced to speculate.
No. So I don't have a legal background, but funny enough, I actually do have some experience with bankruptcy, not me personally, but for anybody that knows me out there, I actually got into sort of the political media sphere, if you will, through a close personal friend of mine by the name of Owen Schroyer. And he works for none other than Mr. Alex Jones, who has gone through perhaps one of the largest bankruptcy cases almost in history. He was sued for something to the tune of $1.4 trillion. And so his company, in order to kind of keep his house, keep his car, keep, his sort of personal life sustainable, he tried to file bankruptcy for InfoWars, which is owned by a company called Free Speech Systems, LLC. And so what I can tell people is that the bankruptcy process is extremely complicated. It's not really something that someone that's not a lawyer should be going into the weeds on. So I will just say that just because someone hired a bankruptcy attorney doesn't necessarily mean that they're filing for bankruptcy. It may mean that they just need to do such significant restructuring to their company that there would be really no one else more qualified to do that than an attorney that does that. So that's just a little bit of what I think about it.
It could be we're hiring you because we're trying to avoid going to bankruptcy, and what do we need to do preemptively? What would be the tipping point where we're no longer able to pull it back from the edge?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It could be a flag for help too as well. Like a filing bankruptcy is not a like Red Lobster. Every Red Lobster in the United States shuts down tomorrow.
Right.
Rather, we're declaring that we're in distress. We're looking for buyers. We're looking for investors. We have a lot of exciting things. So just because you hire an attorney, and even if you declare Chapter 11, that doesn't mean the next day they're coming in, they're moving out of the office.
Right.
It rather means some things could significantly change. But practically speaking, what that does mean is that you have the biggest conservative media company in the United States looking at a very questionable, shaky future. At the very least, maybe not if they will exist, but in what form they will exist.
Right.
Yeah, good and point. It's important for the audience to know, too, that there's a big difference between Chapter 7 bankruptcy and Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I believe the latter is restructuring with the intention of remaining a business. So if there was anything going on with the Daily Wire, I don't think it has anything to do with them potentially closing. But I do, and I mean, honestly, guys, how long can they really continue to exist if they continuously put out these talking points that are very evidently so unpopular with the viewers? I mean, they're dropping like flies, and I just don't know how much longer they can kind of keep up this facade of no, we're doing fine, and no, everything's good. And just to also put something in perspective, these reports that came out over the weekend, Ben did the interview with Megyn Kelly saying they were fine. That was 6-7 days ago. So that was actually before any of this stuff came out. We already know there has been issues confirmed by people leaving, especially Jeremy Boring. So I just think they're kind of doing this tightrope act. And this is just my opinion, but I think they're lying. And I think the audience senses that they're lying. And I just am not too sure what the future is in media for people that so clearly seem to be aligned with a particular agenda.
So let me ask you this. What do you think the future is? So now getting beyond the Daily Wire, what do you think the future, because right now it feels like the left, like the hard left, transgenderism and, all, whatever, Kamala, that platform was handedly defeated. Obviously, there's still some raging leftists who are never going to put the woke away and who are going to double down, and praise God for it. That's great. That just makes our job easier. But it does seem like, some people have, seen the light and are kind of, moving towards the center. Gavin Newsom trying to, rebrand himself with Charlie Kirk, those kinds of things. And it seems like MAGA has won so handedly that it's almost like I feel like the battle now is not going to be so much MAGA versus the left, but internally on the right. And it's not just that MAGA defeated the left, the hard left, but it seems like MAGA may have defeated your Bushes, and Romney's, like even and Cheney's
neocons.
The neocons might have gotten beaten the worst out of everybody. It seems like that, like they may be done forever, and so my point is, you kind of had two parties, the left and the neocons. MAGA came in and just crushed both of them, and but I don't think we're going to be moving away from a two-party system anytime soon, and taking politics out of it. But in terms of media, and what we're trying to do and others, what do you think the future holds? Like, do you think it's what I'm saying, like decentralized, just a bunch of, small contributors? Could anybody rise to the top, in this environment again, or are the major players already set? Right? Is it just going to be, you've got some of your legacy guys who arrived 20 years ago, with notoriety like Tucker, and they'll continue to have that status, until their careers, until they retire, and or do you think can something like the Daily Wire ever happen again? Are the conditions even there? Do they even exist to where somebody could build something further right and attain that kind of influence, or is it just going to be a lot of little guys?
So my perspective is that, first of all, I want to preface this by saying that it's fantastic that the far left, some of these crazy ideologies that we all are so wholeheartedly against, it's terrific that they're on their heels and it appears that they've lost that war and that hopefully it's eliminated from our society. But this is unfortunate. And again, I voted for Trump 3 times. I consider myself to be conservative, but you said this the other day, Joel. With conservatives like these, who needs liberals? These our movement, if you will, the MAGA movement, effectively and most noticeably after the July assassination attempt on Donald Trump, when Elon Musk threw his hat in the arena with this crazy amount of money, by virtue of doing that, and also by purchasing X and essentially turning it into, let's be honest, people are paid on X to give their opinions. Elon Musk is very closely and openly associated with Donald Trump. He owns this platform. So that effectively almost makes it paid political propaganda, considering that you're literally paid to do it. And the things that are trending and the most popular are typically pro-Elon, pro-Trump material. But I think what's happened is the MAGA movement, which was based in nationalistic, pro-native, populist sentiments, has effectively been dragged to the left, really to the center left, because any of these things that conservatives are supposed to be standing for, things like just overall degeneracy. Like we saw this whole thing, this alleged incident with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., some of these sexual misgivings and things of that nature. And what was the response you started to see? You started seeing people say things like, oh, who cares? I don't care how many women he slept with. I don't care if he's disrespected his wife and his family. And his wife committed suicide. And apparently the reason was due to his infidelity. And this was back, I believe, in the early 90s or late 80s. So the point is, though, yes, I think that we have forgotten what being conservative in America really is. And that is not being aligned with these huge corporations or Elon Musk or any of that. And another sign that things have so drastically changed is you just look who was in attendance of the inauguration. You've got guys like Sam Altman, guy that participates in surrogacy and homosexual, all that stuff.
Right.
You've got Elon Musk, you've got Jeff Bezos, you've got Bill Gates, you've got all of these entities that the Trump sphere swore allegiancy to fight against. And now you see all these people are lining up to cozy up to the administration. So I think that you're seeing the right be co-opted by this new force, and how that relates to media. I think the people that have the courage, that have the intellect, that have the orating ability to actually effectively combat this sort of new deep state, if you will, I think those are the people that are going to be very successful in this new hyper-competitive media landscape. And I think you're actually seeing that today in the shift in popularity of some of these major figures. And I also do think that is why a guy like Matt Walsh is sort of sensing the direction the wind is blowing and starting to intensify some of his talking points.
Yeah.
Well said. Michael, Wes, any thoughts?
I was just going to say, I can think to some of the things the Daily Wire has done. You talked about, if these are our conservatives. I mean, his ad for Jeremy Razors had inappropriately dressed women. The movie that they produced, Run, Fight, Hide, had like explicit nudity, was full of F words. Like, that's it. We're getting back to based conservative content.
Right.
And it's the same slop with just,
right.
Like, what even are we doing different? Exactly to your point, Dominique. We have to wipe the slate of that. We have to say, no. Not like this, not pretending to look exactly like the world, look exactly like the stuff Hollywood's produced. We've got to put all of that away. And what you're going to lead with, I had a good friend, he said, the second you hear someone talking, like Daily Wire did, we're coming for Disney. He's like, your level of hubris is off the charts.
Right.
You're not going to be making feature films right out of the gate.
Right.
You're going to be doing things like this. You're going to be talking. You're going to be building. probably a local community,
Right.
extending and building a network. You do those hard things first as the foundation, and then you build up and you prove yourself in many ways. So from the foundation of it, Christian principles, from the foundation of it, moral principles, from the foundation of it, virtues. If you don't, you'll have a base that's narrow. Jesus speaks of this, a sand, and then you'll get there and you're doing advertisements like Jeremy Boring, where you're surrounded by scantily clad women. Like, wait a second, what's we build all of this to do? And not a surprise, he took $1 billion company, and it's very possible that his ego destroyed it. As a warning to men, he defied the odds. He built something of generational wealth, and in less than 10 years, he probably also destroyed it.
Yeah, it's really tricky because, like, even you mentioning Disney there at Wes, in some ways, the reason that Disney became what it became was exactly what we talked about earlier in the episode, which was they were early adopters to a new technology. And so it really does present a very difficult problem that we have to think through, in that the established fortunes and companies that are so very strong and powerful. I mean, Jeff Bezos is not just going to roll over and become irrelevant, right? Bill Gates is not going to do that either. And it is a real big thing that we have to think about as true conservatives. Let's give the benefit of the doubt to the MAGA movement and say they wanted to do some real good and push in this populist direction like you're talking about, Dominique. What do we do when the rich and powerful, who were the early adopters at one point, I mean, that, like, there are so many people and companies who are what they are because their grandfather found oil under his property, right? And then built a company, and that became a steel company. And it is incredibly difficult to build something of that scale just from scratch. And now that there are companies and people of that scale, of course they're going to flock to the power, right? Their vested interest is to be close to power so that they can continue to be lucrative and financially profitable and expand and grow and increase. And so in some ways, like, we bemoan the fact that Bezos and all those others were there at the inauguration. Gates were there at the inauguration. On the other hand, though, like, that obviously was going to happen.
Of course they are.
Yes. Yes.
Of course they are. Yeah, and you have to be impervious to that temptation.
Right.
Like, that's the Christian life for all of us, is like, as the Lord exalts whoever he sees fit to exalt, which typically, biblically speaking, is the humble. The Lord exalts the humble. But having been exalted, there's always the temptation that you can remain small in your own eyes, or you can begin to believe your own press, right? That's what happened with Saul. Right? Samuel says, you were once small in your own eyes. Right? When Samuel was looking to anoint him as king, he couldn't even find him. You know, he was hidden away. And not because of some insecurity complex. Like Saul, even his physical stature, he was head and shoulders, the Bible says, above everyone else.
Right.
You know, like, which, for the record, getting into the Nephilim and giants for just a second, that's part of the reason why Goliath was a legit giant. This is not a 6'9" person. This is at least 10 feet tall. Because if he was 6'9", then Saul would have been about his height. So, anyways, but the point is, like, Saul is, he's an Adonis. He looks like Thor. You know what I mean? Like, he's tall, he's strong, he's strapping, he's courageous, all these kinds of things. But eventually, along the way, as everybody rallies to him, like, what do you do when all of a sudden there's a king in Israel? You know, like, well, you play nice, you know, and you come and you massage his ego and all these kinds of things. And eventually, Saul believes his own press. He becomes full of himself, and he starts making executive decisions. He begins to compromise the clear word of the Lord spoken through the prophet Samuel. And eventually, the kingdom is torn away from him. He loses the kingdom. And God has done that. And God can do that, and God will do that again and again and again. And it's so important. You have to seize power, right? So for the longest time, Christians have just been, especially evangelicals, have been weak and pathetic, and have basically demonized anything that would remotely fall into the realm of masculinity, ambition especially. So ambition has only been spoken of as though it were a vice. You know, ambition. Watch out for ambition. You don't want to have ambition. You don't, like, and then it's so frustrating, because then the same pastor who's demonizing ambition in every young man will turn around on Father's Day and then begin to condemn every single father in the room for being apathetic. And so, well, but you just told me the other 51 weeks of the year not to be ambitious. Like, what do you want? And so ambition is good. Power is not inherently evil or right. Power is a tool, just like everything else. Hammers are great, but you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use it to bash in a man's skull. It depends on its utility. How are you going to use it? And so too it is with masculinity and particular ambition. And so we need ambitious men. We need masculine men, courageous men. The problem, though, is that when you find the crown that's lying in the gutter and you decide to pick it up and put it on your head, then you are going to be faced with certain temptations that otherwise you wouldn't be faced with. And ambitious men will have, David. We always think about, David's mighty men. It's like it said, everybody who was downcast and trodden, and those who were in debt, and all, they all rallied to David. It's a little bit implicit. It's not explicit in the text, but I don't think it's far-fetched to assume. I wonder if there were any bad characters who also rallied to David, right? They knew that he was the guy, that he was up and coming. He's going to be the new thing. I wonder if there were some bad faith characters that also rallied to David and were like, hey, man, we want to be in your inner sanctum. We want to be, when you come into your kingship, we can see it's written in the stars. It's going to happen. And so we're trying to make alliances now. Like, there are probably some guys that David, that David needed to shape up and sanctify and equip and teach and train. And then there were probably some other guys that David needed to say, get lost.
Right.
And that's just inevitable. Like, when God exalts someone, he exalts them because of their authenticity, because of their humility, because of their honesty, their integrity, their courage, their ambition, all these things. But as God exalts someone's profile, they will inevitably come to face temptations that most men could only dream of. They will have opportunity after opportunity to sell out and to compromise. And it's a lesson for all of us, if the Lord would see fit, to increase our views, to increase our influence, those kinds of things. You better get right with God now. It's far easier to make vows with the Lord, to set in accountability internally, all those kinds of things when you're small. It's a lot harder to do that when you're big. Let's go to our last commercial break. And then when we come back, we want to deal with, we've got a lot of super chats. We want to honor those. And anybody who has questions for us, go ahead and put your questions in the chat right now, because Nathan's going to start bifurcating them. So make it clear. Say question, and then put your question there, and we'll get to as many of them as we can when we come back from the break. All right, the clock is running out. You need to go and register now for our Christ is King, How to Defeat Trash World Conference. It's happening the year of our Lord 2025, April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That's a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And by God's grace, we're able to provide for you an all-star lineup. We've got Steve Dace, Calvin Robinson, Orrin McIntyre, Dr. Stephen Wolf, Eric Kahn, David Reese, Andrew Isker, John Harris, A.D. Robles, Dan Burkholder, Dusty Devers, Ben Garrett, C.J. Engel, and yours truly, Pastor Joel Webben. Come on out, join us April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2025, Thursday through a Saturday. Go to rightresponseconference.com to register today. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com. Listen, guys, you probably listen to Right Response Ministries because you take the dominion mandate offered to us in Scripture seriously. Well, unsurprisingly, so does Dominion Wealth Strategist. As the only distinctly reformed financial consulting firm, they help Calvinistic, covenantal, and confessional Christians to steward their resources faithfully in a way that actually aligns with God's Word. Dominion Wealth leverages all corners of the financial service industry as independent brokerage agents, matching you with suitable products and services from dozens of top industry providers. Their mission is to equip believers to secure their family's future and build a legacy that glorifies God by building holistic financial strategies that include budgeting, insurance, debt management, retirement planning, estate planning, and more. In order to make wealth Christian again with a portfolio that might even put King Solomon to shame, go and take dominion over your finances today by visiting www.reformed.money and book an introductory overview right now. All of Christ for all of life and all of finance for Christendom. All right, so we've got some super chats and questions, but before we get into them, Dominic, two things. One, I want to give you a chance if you have any final thoughts on our topic for today, the Daily Wire. And then secondly, do you want to stick around for the questions? Some of them relate to our topic, and then some of them are theological, but you may be interested, and we're happy to have you. Basically, at this point in the show, I'd say we've got another half hour. Do you want to stick around with us, or do you want to give some final thoughts on the Daily Wire and log off?
I'll absolutely stick around. I'll give some final thoughts if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I think that Daily Wire is ultimately going to go in the direction that society goes. And I think it's one of two ways. I think that gentlemen like us are either going to become significantly more popular because people will understand that we actually are telling the truth. We actually, well, at least, especially in your case, trying to, you're trying to guide people ultimately to God and to maintain those Christian principles that have been so valuable to maintaining this country and keeping it going, how it is today. And I ultimately think that either that's going to happen and we are going to experience sort of like a second awakening and a victory in woke war 2, we'll call it, or, and this is unfortunate, and this is kind of what I'm sensing, or you're going to see some of the biggest censorship laws passed down that you've really ever encountered. And something I find a little bit troubling is I definitely am a big fan of some of the freedom of speech and things on X for certain. But I'm worried that they may actually, because it's very clear that the conversation has changed, especially regarding things like Israel, which Daily Wire is, they're known for their affiliation. But I think that they may use some of this online rhetoric to actually justify some of these types of censorship laws I think they're interested in passing down. And with the creation of these task force with the sole goal of eliminating anti-Semitism, with the deportations of these students that you're seeing, I think it's kind of pretty evident that is something that this administration is really interested in. And if it ends up that that's true, I think someone like Daily Wire will flourish simply because they're giving they're playing in a very advantageous sandbox, if you will. So I think you're either going to see total victory, total America first, total Christian victory on our behalf, or I think you're going to see draconian censorship laws get passed down and using AI to scan people's content. And actually, you're seeing that even today with the program that the State Department just released. It's called, Catch and Revoke. And they're speaking about finding these people that are putting anti-Semitic talking points into, whether it's on campus or whether it's in social media, and ultimately, revoking their visas. So if they can do that to some of these foreigners who I don't want them to be here anyways, but still, if they can do that to them, they can ultimately use the same apparatus to do it to us. And if anyone's old enough to know about the Patriot Act, that's exactly what they did. They put it all around, Islamic fear mongering and terrorist attack on 9/11. And then it really ended up being something that really went against the freedom of normal American citizens. So I think that's kind of what I think is going to happen, guys.
Well said. So to sum that up, because that was incredibly insightful, and I'm going to give you guys some very practical pastoral advice, some counsel application here. What Dominic just said, what that means in a practical sense is go for the gold, be courageous, be bold, preach Christ unashamedly, stand for America first, Americans first, and buy Palantir stock as a black pill hedge. That's basically what Dominic just said.
Basically.
Right? That's let's go for bust. The Lord is with us. He can win by many or few. And we want to be filled with faith. But if you also want to have a hedge, never hurts, all I heard you saying the whole time you were talking was Peter Thiel.
That's right.
So straight up AI technology that can scan your face to where if you have an alias or anything like that, all of a sudden, boom, they've got your license, they've got you pegged, and all of a sudden you're paying fines, or you're being blacklisted. You can't go on flights because you said something critical about our greatest ally, and that is like we do need to be aware. I voted for Trump. I'm working towards the repealing of the 19th Amendment, and I brought my wife to vote for Trump, right? I'm not an ideologue. I want to win. I'm going to, so you can have an ideal, what you think, by your conviction, and yet don't let the perfect be the enemy of the possible, right? Politics is the realm of the possible. We're trying to win. Okay, so I voted for Trump. I'm glad he's elected, but we do need to be honest. If we think that, all right, we've won, it's over, it's done, let's just go celebrate, then we're being foolish. There are still a lot of evils in the world, and the MAGA party has cozied up with many of them, whether it be abortion, whether it be basically like lesbian and gay and bi. You just
gays against groomers.
Yeah, exactly. Not super friendly with the T, but the LGB, that's perfectly fine. Certainly Zionist. Trump is a Zionist. We just have to acknowledge that. And so all that being said, like I knew all these things going in, and my church, we talked about these things, and we said, well, it's 2025, the year of our Lord 2025. There's no viable non-Zionist option. Right, you have to know where you are, and we felt like Trump was better, and I stand by that. I think that's better. But if we pretend as though there are no threats that we're facing today and that the battle is over, then we are being foolish. So well said, Dominic. Let's go ahead. Here's our first super chat, and this is really helpful. T-Mart 2323, $5 from him. Thank you, T-Mart. Very generous. We appreciate that. He says, God bless the conference that's coming up this week. Starts on Thursday. He said, God bless the conference, and remember to beware of agitators and false flags. Could be libs or feds. They would love to make the movement look bad. He's absolutely right. If anybody who's coming to the conference and listening to me right now within the sound of my voice, that is not hyperbolic. That's not silly. That is true. I can say for certain, because I've already been contacted, and I've told them to pound sand in a Christian way, which is usually pound sand, God bless. That's a Christian way. That's
in Christ.
In Christ, pound sand. But I have been contacted already by a journalist, and I don't know what's worse, FBI or journalist, but by a couple asking if they could come, and very clearly on the left, and asking for permission if they could come and have permission to interview not just speakers, but guests. So if you're attending this conference, you will be likely approached by people asking you questions. Don't be stupid.
Right.
Do not be foolish. It's a Christian conference. You have nothing to be ashamed of. We are going to be heralding nothing extreme. We are just moderate centrists who are going to be heralding the Christian truths that were believed by your grandparents and every other generation of all of human history. But because we live in a world gone mad, there are people who think that is extreme and who would love for you to have a rough life. And so don't make it easy on them. There will be journalists. There could be some FBI agents. I think that it would be naive and foolish to think that there won't be. Yeah. So be aware of that. Okay,
I was just going to say, too, Nathan said, at the doors, IDs will be checked. But if you have reason, you're in a job for some reason where your last name, it would be disadvantageous, show your ID or your name badge at the door, but by all means tuck it in if it's something that could endanger you. Or even contact us and say, hey, could I get a Patrick P on there?
We're going to have security.
Patrick,
we've got guys, we're going to have informal security, guys carrying, but then we also have, formal security. We're going to have a couple sheriffs that are going to be there and help keep us safe. And so you will need to show your badge, not necessarily your driver's license, but you'll come in, you register, show your badge at the door to get in. But then, yes, Wes, that's a great practical piece of advice. If you're in a line of work where attending our conference could get you into trouble, show your badge at the door and then tuck it in your pocket. You don't have to wear your badge as you're going around. We don't need to make it easy for the leftist. These are people who hate Christ, and they hate you, and they hate your kids, and they want to ruin your life. And,
yeah.
and they will be there because it's impossible to vet all of them. All right, here's the next one. This is Chris.
It's
Tisking.
actually two. He's got
two of
two.
them. All right, we'll read them back to back. Chris Tisking, two $50 super chats. So $100, very generous. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate it. He says, how do you deal with brothers, and he puts brothers in quotation marks here, I appreciate that, who call you a demon or satanic simply for wanting cultural Christianity? I want Christ in everything. That's my politics. That's everything. I've gotten a lot of pushback from Daily Wire fans on this. He says DW. I'm gonna say Daily Wire. Here's the second half. Could be a different DW. Second half, he says, my pastor is clearly peeved, frustrated at me posting about Israel and Judaism in the church Slack. So they've got a church Slack line. Executive pastor is for it, as long as it lines up with positive fruits. Lead pastor hates it, and some churchgoers are gossiping about me and my wife. What do I do now?
He added a comment too that wasn't a super chat that said his wife wears a head covering, but she's the only woman, and she gets really derided for that behind the scenes by the other women.
Right. God forbid that a woman cover her head. I get mad about these kinds of things. It's like they're transing kids, and your biggest concern as a Christian minister is that that somebody's wife might have a conviction to do what R.C. Sproul's wife currently still does. Mm-hmm. Vesta Sproul still covers her head.
Yeah.
And so your big concern is we might have an abusive, misogynist husband in our midst. Meanwhile, like 90% of the parents in your church are sending their kids to public school to learn about, transgenderism in the 6th grade. Like, it's laughable. So, all right, so what do you guys, let's go to Dominic first, and then we'll go to Wes and Michael, and I'll be quiet for a little bit. What would you say? He's saying, I've got guys who profess to be Christians, followers of Christ, brothers. They're calling me a demon and satanic because I don't just want my church to be Christian, but I want cultural Christianity. I want a Christian country. And I'm even getting some flack from my pastor. What do you say, Dominic?
The first thing I'd say is that there's so many people that claim that they want to live in a strict Christian culture, and as soon as anyone actually promotes that ideology, they immediately ostracize them and insult them and alienate them. So I think that, first of all, that's ridiculous, and I think that as long as this gentleman is telling the truth, he's not coming from a place of animosity, he's not coming from a place of hatred, but he's just simply calling out what he believes to be the truth and what ultimately is going to help people just be guided towards more reasonable decision making regarding some of these matters. I think he should continue to speak up. I don't think that he should allow people to silence him or to make him feel guilty, especially about the thing with his wife's head covering. Look, like many of these people, if they could actually, if they weren't so cowardice and worried about other people's opinions, they'd likely be saying the same thing. So just always remember what someone actually tells you, especially in a public forum like a Slack chat, and what they actually think deeply internally, they may often sometimes contradict each other. And so,
that's so true.
I actually give quite a bit of credit to this gentleman for speaking up, and I hope he continues to do so.
Well said. Wes, Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that because this is a church where you are supposed to be nourished and fed spiritually from the word, and the elders are entrusted with taking watch over your soul, there's going to have to be times in each church over the next years and decades maybe where members are willing to face some pressure from kind of the established perspective on a variety of things. And so I think that sometimes we are called to put our neck out there, and like Dominic says, to keep speaking respectfully, obviously not sowing dissension, respectfully voicing your opinion and presenting a biblical case for it. On the other hand, institutions and a church, even a small local church, is an institution.
That's right.
It is very, very difficult to change directions on any institution once it's got momentum and inertia behind it. And so just being wise with at what point are you being helpful to your church, still submitting, because even that can become a problem. Like you start to resent your elders rather than to esteem and submit to them. And so just being very careful of what is going on with that dynamic. If the church is set in its perspective, the chances that you are going to change it are small, right?
That's well said.
And so sometimes we have to voice, just for the sake of going through the biblical pattern of speaking to people individually, not speaking about them behind their back, giving truth as long of a possibility to win the day, but then also realizing like it is an institution, and the likelihood of you steering that rudder, you don't even have your hand on the rudder, right? So it is possible that would no longer be the church for you after a period of time. And, I think that's probably the more likely outcome. I don't know the church and how long of a history you have with it. If your family's been there for 4 generations and you have a ton of credibility, that might be a different story. So
right. Yep. That's one of the most common emails I get all the time is people asking, how do I reform my church? How do I change my church? And I usually just, email them back and say, are you the lead preaching pastor?
Right.
If you are, then I give you about a 50% chance of being successful in changing your church as the lead pastor. If you are not the lead pastor, I give you a 0% chance. And I think we always forget the Bible puts so much emphasis on unity and peace. But we forget that one of the tools that the Lord has made available to us in keeping the peace is going separate ways. Paul and Barnabas realized that the only way that they could be at peace with one another was to bless one another to go and minister in separate portions of the Lord's vineyard. And sadly, sometimes that's just what it is. And I think the Lord honors that. I think the Lord honors a man who may be biblically right, but also realizes that tearing down a church from the inside is not pleasing to the Lord, and is willing to, he tries a little bit, it becomes abundantly clear that it's not welcome, and so then he tries to hold his peace and see if he can abide, but if it's too much for his conscience, then in order to be in integrity to his own conscience before the Lord, but also to keep the peace with that church and that community and honor those elders, he chooses to leave. Leaving is actually, if it's done well, it's actually a very, very honoring thing to do. A lot of pastors, I think sometimes pastors are the worst. But a lot of times pastors, they put their parishioners in between this rock and a hard place where like all the time, we have people who have left our church, through certain controversies over like the last year, and they're precious people. I love them. I have no ill will. I have no hard feelings. And sometimes people in the church will come and they'll talk to me and say why did so-and-so leave? And I'll say, well, so-and-so, reached out and they said these were the reasons. I can't believe they did it. And I'm like, dude, no. Change your attitude. They're allowed to leave a church. And it shocks people sometimes because they're like, but Joel, you have so many convictions. And they just assume that a man who has a lot of convictions must necessarily be a tyrant. They think that if you have a lot of opinions, then you necessarily must be controlling. No, I can have a lot of opinions because I have a book that God wrote for me and I know how to read. And so I can have a lot of opinions because God has a lot of opinions. And yet that not translate into a tyrannical approach from the pastorate and wielding, authority and cracking down. You must do that. Everybody knows I'm a head covering guy. My wife and all my girls, they wear head coverings. Do you think even 50% of our church wears head coverings? The women?
No,
probably 40%.
No.
And I go around and I make them
you hand them out on Sunday morning.
Women are walking in the door and I'm like doily, just slam it. No, we don't do that. We don't do that. And so my point is to this young man, if you have to, leave. And that is actually a peaceful option. To any pastor who's listening, let people leave is the point that I'm making. Let people leave and don't disparage them. That person leaving, oftentimes they're actually doing you a courtesy by not staying around and trying to change the church and disagreeing. They're realizing, I profoundly disagree, I can't stay, and I don't want to be divisive, so leaving is the only option I have. Wes?
Oh, the only thing I had to add was I think of Noah, and then it's Nehemiah, or they're building, and tons of people are mocking them. Right. You're building a wall. You're trying to get this going. You're trying to build an ark. What's the point? And they do it for, in this case, their children. Like when I think of building cultural Christianity, to be honest, most of us probably won't live in it. Right. If we labor by God's grace and we're even successful, that's probably 10, 20 years down the road. So it's not even like I'm looking forward to enjoying the benefits of it, but it's for my children, for my grandchildren. So same thing with Noah, with the exiles that came back. They built, and tons of people pelted rocks at them and mocked and laughed, but they had kept their head down and they kept working because they said, I know the thing that I'm building is going to be so necessary. It's going to be so protective. It's going to be so helpful, not even necessarily for me, because I'm not having to do the hard work of building it. I mean, Noah spent 100 years building that silly ark. But he said, I'm doing it because I know, I'm convinced God's told me, I have the word assuring me that this labor is not in vain.
Right.
Amen. Dominic, you sounded like you had one more thing you wanted to add.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say it's always important to keep in mind for the person that asked the question that, yeah, you want to remain strong with your convictions, of course. But if it comes to the point where I spoke about him getting alienated, but if you yourself are alienating, people in your church, your pastor, your mother or father, your children, whatever it is, there are places and there are times for political battles and things of that nature, or extremely sharp opinions on certain subject matters, and there are not times for that. So I just would tell him also, don't ruin any relationships that you really deeply. I mean, if it's something that's completely, like it's someone's arguing for transgenderism or something like that, sure, you can go ahead and draw a line in the sand. But if it's just something where like the Israel thing, I get it, and I really do, but don't ruin your lifelong relationships over it, because sometimes people tend to really, really go hardcore. So just wanted to remind him to be mindful. That's all.
Good point. Alex says this: is anyone anti-Israel on the Blaze? We were talking about the Blaze earlier being, in our
less
assessment, less gatekeeping than Daily Wire. And he says Glenn Beck, for instance, is a Mormon Zionist. The worst combo, he says in parentheses. Yeah, not a great combo.
I don't actually know.
It's like, I may be a Mormon, but have no fear, I'm also a Zionist, and I am literally publicly requesting dual citizenship in Israel. Remember when he did that? He wrote like some letter to Bibi. He did.
Wait, Glenn Beck did?
Yes, and it was like he. You remember this, Dominic? And he's like publicly just kissing Bibi's, hindsight, and asking for I would be so honored by being given honorary citizenship in Israel. Am I making it up, Dominic?
No, it's 100%. I'll send you guys the clip after the show.
No, or don't.
So he sends it's like, thanks, I hate it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any...
Aaron McIntyre is willing to say what I think anyone at a baseline should be able to say, which is our relationship to Israel, as far as it goes with military, as far as it goes with funding, as far as it goes with dual citizenship at AIPAC, is suspect. Anyone should be able, with two pairs of working eyes, to see that.
I think also Jason Whitlock has had some good, I think nobody's going like hard in the paint, and
You're not on the Blaze.
I'm not on the Blaze. There are reasons, but Oren and Jason Whitlock, I think, are two examples who I have seen publicly criticize Israel.
Yep.
So,
cool.
Okay, next one. This is Jeff Halfley. I'm going to just read a couple of them here because he's got a few. So one is $9.99, $10 from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. He says, taking a charitable take on evangelical aversion toward power. Today's evangelical churches come out of denominations that have historically been populated by relatively powerless demographics.
And he added a comment after that said a lot of the Christian demographics that had political power have apostatized.
Mm-hmm. I see. So you got... I guess what he's saying is that you've got like some...
Yeah.
Okay, so he says here's a follow-up. Powerful people historically belong to denominations which have long since become apostate. I think he's right. Like we've talked about this, a lot of the mainline Protestant denominations that really did have power, they're all raging leftist,
right?
And have rainbow flags, outside. And then a lot of the other evangelical ones that are more conservative and biblically faithful, it may not be necessarily that they actually have a commitment against, wielding power, but they just historically have been marginalized and didn't have it to begin with. And I think that's probably true at some level. It is frustrating when people are like, well, why don't you build institutions? Why don't you do this? And it's like, give me a minute. give me a minute. I'm working on it. It actually takes time. Like Joel Berry, well, everybody, you're criticizing the Daily Wire, but wokeness only destroys, whether it's woke left or woke right, and all you guys on the woke right, you're not building anything. And I retweeted and I said, I really appreciate this in public endorsement from Joel Berry for New Christendom, and admitting that they're not woke, because they actually are building something. But the point is, it takes time. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? Dominique, you got something?
I think it's so ignorant that Joel Berry has the stones to go and say, oh, just build something on your own. That was exactly what like radical leftists would say when they were censoring people during COVID, or many other numerous instances. They say, oh, it's a private company, we can do what we want. And so it's just like, I see some of Joel, not to go after him specifically, but I see some of his behavior on X. And to me, it's like, do you actually want to build a bridge? Do you actually want to be unified with fellow Christians despite this one disagreement you have? Or do you just continuously want to stir things up and, essentially be a bad actor? So I just think that it's just very hypocritical. And that's the main issue we're seeing, with the super pro-Israel sectors of the right wing. And I just don't think they're able to escape that hypocrisy anymore. So I think, someone like Joel Berry, who claims to be conservative and, have all these principles, when it really comes down to it, are you really, Joel? You don't seem free speech to me. You don't seem to really be pushing Christian principles to me. You seem to be a bad actor. And I just think that I think they hate that the facade has been lifted and people like you guys are exposing them. And so I think it's going to be a long road for them, because I think people have had enough.
Yeah, I think so too. Nathan, real quick, go back to the questions. There was one that I want to address. So Statistics Man 24.
This is for Dominic.
This is for you, Dominic. He said, is that Lord Stanley's cup behind Dominique?
As a matter of fact, my friend, I'm actually in the lovely city of St. Louis, Missouri in 2019. Perhaps
Blues.
One of the greatest Stanley Cup runs ever. So yes, it is.
Wow.
Yes, it is. It's a miniature model, but yeah, we do.
It's very nice.
Exactly.
Dominic, I grew up in South America, in Venezuela, and my parents were missionaries there. And I don't know what it was. Hockey must have been incredibly cheap for Venezuelan television commercials to license, or television stations to license. So we didn't have NFL, we didn't have baseball, we didn't have any of that, but we had hockey on all the time. And so I actually grew up watching a lot of hockey in Venezuela.
Wow, there you go.
Yep.
To be honest, I'm not even particularly that much. I mean, I like sports and things, but let's be honest, like we've got much more critical matters happening here.
That's true.
Honestly, yeah.
That's true.
Every now and again, I'll take a gander, but not so much into it. More just a decoration, but hey,
very nice.
Whatever makes people like the set, we're happy to provide.
Cool. All right, a couple more that I want to hit from Jeff Halfley. So each of these are $2 super chats. We appreciate you, Jeff. Thank you. Seriously, Jeff is single-handedly
Jeff and Ben just locked in
right.
arms
Like
together.
Neil Shinby, tweeted the other day, like, I want to know who's funding the woke right, or the new dissident right, or whatever. Well, here you go. It's Jeff Halfley, with his $2 super chats. But they stack up. You get enough of them. So he said this. Y'all see JD? So he's referring to JD Hall. His review of the Fight for Faith, F4F debate. So that's with Chris
Rosenbaum?
I don't think there's an N. I think it's just Roseboro or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that. Roseboro, he's a Lutheran. The debate that he had with Corey Mahler. I did watch it. I don't really watch Stone Choir. I've seen 2 episodes that earlier on, a couple men in the church asked me what I thought, and I said, I'm not in the habit of telling grown men what to do.
Right.
When it comes to listening, if a grown man in my church wanted to read Mein Kampf, I would say, put your discernment cap on, and be a Christian about it. But yeah, you're allowed to read a book, and so I watched those 2 episodes and gave some thoughts. But for the most part, I don't really tune in. But a debate, something like that, really is interesting, and I just wanted to know, just even for what's going on in the Reformed world and what's going to come next. That was something that I without any qualms or any apology whatsoever, I think every Christian should probably tune in, because it really did, I think, a decent job in highlighting the differences and what people are so worried about. And so yes, I watched it. My thoughts are that if Chris Roseboro's if his goal was to multiply Corey Muller's influence by 10 times, and he nailed it. I think he did a great job.
He locked in.
He locked in, man. Like, if that's the goal. Now, I've thought, I was under the impression that the Reformed world hated Stone Choir. So it surprised me that that they were, like intentionally working towards building their prominence. But that's what happened. And it happened for multiple reasons, but at least one. I'll cite one. Chris Roseborough was very clearly emotional. He was angry. He was, I think, deceitful in trying to trap Corey. So my question, I just have one question for you. Why are you deliberately twisting the word of God and lying to all of your listeners? Because they were talking about the curse of Ham. And Corey was like, I'm not doing that. Yes, the Bible says, cursed be Canaan. But this is the position of Martin Luther. And then he goes on to quote Luther. It says the reason why it is a curse of Ham, but the reason why Noah says cursed be Canaan is because Ham, who had actually committed the sin of uncovering his father's nakedness, it was such a heinous sin that Noah was not even willing to mention his name, and that the descendants of Ham were cursed, but not equally cursed, that Canaan was particularly cursed, and we see that through Joshua and the eradicate. And so my point is this, I'm not even saying I agree. There were certain points that I'll actually say I disagree, undoubtedly disagree. But if you're going to engage somebody, you need to do it fairly, and you need to do it calmly. You need to be objective. You need to be reasonable. You don't need to use emotionally charged language. Why are you lying? Because then what Corey was immediately able to do is say, well, then why are you a Lutheran when, according to what you just said about me, lying and intentionally, twisting the word of God, the guy that Luther, that my view literally comes from him. It is Luther's view. So if you're ready publicly right now to say that you would excommunicate Martin Luther and that Martin Luther is in hell and that he's a heretic, because that's what you're saying about me, right? Because it wasn't just I disagree or I find these things to be problematic or I think this is insensitive or I think this is even dangerous. It's not that. It's way beyond. It's you are a wolf, a false teacher, and going to hell. And about this particular view, simply calling it the curse of Ham instead of the curse of Canaan, when on that point of the discussion, Corey had a perfectly reasonable, argument for why he did that, and it happens to be that he got it from Martin Luther. And so I did watch it. There are certain things that I personally do not hold, and there are things that I not just I disagree. No, there's certain things that I'm like, no, I really think that's problematic. I really do. But I will say this: that was if
as far as debate performances go, it was
if you really are concerned, then fire up your podcast or whatever, do long form content, make your arguments, root them in Scripture. But young men are not going to fall for smoke and mirrors, emotional. It doesn't work anymore. There was a time when that tactic would have worked. There was a time where you could, I think Chris actually thought he was doing something that was going to get applause.
That was JD's point, was Chris approached it like he's approaching Bethel. All right, I critiqued Bethel for the last 10 years. Should be no different, right?
You're right. That was JD's point. Mm-hmm. It was very insightful in typical JD fashion. He has some great insights. But he said Chris has made a legacy ministry over 20 years by attacking prosperity gospel, like doing videos on Joel Osteen. Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, Joel Osteen doesn't bite back. Joel Osteen, he's living.
Doesn't know who you are.
He's living his best life now. He doesn't even know who you are. There's no response video. He's never going to come on the channel. He never gets to respond. He never gets to counter. And we all know that even if he did, Joel Osteen, he's not going to bring the receipts. He doesn't have any biblical arguments. In other words, Joel Osteen is an easy target.
Right.
And so you can build a following over the course of 20 years by arguing with the television, by arguing with Joel Osteen and look really great, and people are going to cheer you on. Yeah, you're calling out the prosperity preachers, and there's literally no counter. You're fighting someone who doesn't even know that they're in the fight. You're literally having a video with the person's not even there, and you're picking on. It's like picking a fight with Forrest Gump. Like picking a fight with prosperity preachers it's a pretty easy fight. It's like, and that's fine if that's your thing. You're a discernment minister. You got your 100,000 followers or what, but it's just not something to brag about. It's pretty easy to point out the faults in the prosperity gospel. But if you're going to have a live opponent, and it's Corey Muller, I think that Chris got his clock cleaned and was. It was clear, that's JD's, that was his point, is very clear that this guy has been fighting, just pathetic opponents for 20 years. And
he called it the shooting range and paper targets. He's been out there on the range for 20 years hitting paper targets. Like, look at that.
Right. And now,
bullseye.
And now you picked a real fight, and it was clear to everyone, even like guys who vehemently disagree with Corey Muller. Yeah. Even those guys were like, oh, this is rough.
Right.
So, all right, any thoughts from anybody else on that?
No, I think that, yep.
Okay, next one. Let's just, ETA on U.S. getting a Christian prince. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
5.
Ooh. I think it's either very soon or might not happen.
Oh, snap. What do you think, Dominic?
Strong on that one.
What do you think? Getting the Christian prince, is it happening? 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30? What do you think?
Well, guys, I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility and honor. But, you know what? I'm more in the 20-year range. I would love for it to be like 2, but let's hope Wes is right. Let's just put it that way.
It's like Michael said. It's either going to be 5. Like this constitutional order just continues to crumble really quickly. You go into 2028. It's chaos. You have splintering on all sides, and just someone rises up and says, "I'll take it from here." So either like the 5-year, or like Michael said, it's 2050 in a whole new world.
All right, Alex, good thoughts. Alex
I think we have
says,
one more super chat.
Do you think, okay, we'll get to it in 1 second. Right. Do you think we should still support Trump if he goes to war with Iran? Well, in terms of supporting him, at this point, he's elected. Right. So like that would be my question. Like, what do you mean?
I'm not supporting him now.
So like exactly. My position, honestly, is when it was election season, like we make no apology. I regret no regrets. I regret nothing. We were absolutely vocal and pulled no punches, and we were saying, get out and vote for Trump. And I don't regret it. But I said then, and I'll say again now, I said all along, get him elected. We're talking about a straight up communist as the alternative. The most far left radical president we would have ever had in the history of our country.
And a woman.
Yes. So we made no apology. We were like, vote for Trump. But what we said that whole time is we said, and once he's elected, if that be God's will, then do your Christian duty and call him to account. So that's what we've been doing lately. Get out and vote for Trump. Check. Did that. And now say, sir, we appreciate you. I voted for you.
What the heck?
I don't regret voting for you. Right. But also that executive order, great. That one, great. Yep. Like, so encourage him, because that's the thing. If you only, here's the deal. This is how politics works. If you only call him out and you're boasting on social media, I didn't vote for you because I'm so principled. I did not vote for you. I never would vote for you. And I've never said one positive thing about you. But listen to me as I criticize you now again for the 109th time. Like, I actually want to make a difference. I'm not just trying to put out a catnip for my fan base. I'm not doing what Chris Roseborough has done, and then I'm actually trying to win. So like I publicly tagged both Vance and Trump about a month ago, and it was with IVF. And I said, if you do this, you will be responsible for the blood of more children on your hands if you use federal tax dollars to fund IVF that would take 30 embryos and put 29 of them on ice, most of them to be discarded later on. Please don't do this. But even in that tweet, I still got a lot of flack because I began it with honor. I said, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. I'm so grateful. I voted for you. My wife voted for you. I would have crawled over broken glass to vote for you. And I got mocked. By the purity spiral guys, and like look at him and the way he's groveling with Trump. But here's the deal: I'm not convinced Trump is listening to them or me, But if he was going to listen to one, I'd have the better shot.
Yeah.
So having the ear of a king is a good thing. And one way to have the ear of a king is to vote for him, to support him, to encourage him where you can, but then also call him to account. So I would just say my answer to the question would be do both. Support him where he's good and call him to account where he's wrong. Do both. Any thoughts? Dominique?
I have and I really want to put emphasis on this. I have the exact same ideology as you do as far as supporting Trump and also my behavior prior to the election. I do a lot of breaking news stuff on Twitter. And just to be honest with you, it's not like I was putting half truths out there or anything, but I was making sure to put out news before the election that certainly was not to be considered anti-Trump. It was things about tax breaks. It was things about prospective deportation operations, things that people wanted to vote for. And so I made sure to be a team player because, again, we're talking about literally a communist, non-Christian woman being the leader of this country. And so I don't like when people put things into oversimplified terms, such as, well, it's the lesser of two evils. But even if you think Trump's not a great guy, in this instance, he most certainly was the lesser of two evils. And I think, we got him in. But now it's like, what does victory, what does winning really even mean? And for me, it has to do with many of the topics that we've already discussed today, pushing Christian principles, putting nationalistic or putting people that are actually born in this country and their priorities before foreigners. And I think that not only is it acceptable for people to criticize Trump right now, but if there's instances or there's certain subjects where you are dissatisfied, it's your responsibility as an American to offer this criticism. And I also want to remind people that there's only one person to worship, and that is Jesus Christ. That is not Donald Trump. And a lot of people get confused. They feel that you must have fealty, you must have loyalty to this one figure, when ultimately your real loyalty should only be to God, to your family, and to this country. And so I wish that people would knock it off with this, essentially idolatry, and understand that he's not impervious. He is going to make mistakes. He may have some interests that are against yours, but you can never create change, and he's never going to know about it unless you're willing to courageously and bravely voice your opinion.
Yep. Amen. Yep. Any thoughts from Wes, Michael?
Remember that Kamala's husband, Doug Emhoff, I think that what it is. You're like, well, Trump and Israel, he's Jewish, and he claimed, if we win the election, I'm putting a Jewish menorah in the White House. Right. So you're like, I don't like Trump's and the Adelsons and this, that, and the other. And I get it. But my brother in Christ, the options were not great.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's a great point, because people say, well, yeah, Kamala was a communist, but at least she wasn't a Zionist. Yes, she was.
You think, yeah.
Yes, she was. Her husband literally said, we're going to have a menorah in the White House. And I can almost hear the audience, literally saying right back, I think we're still going to get a menorah in the White House. You might be right. But with Kamala, we would have for sure gotten one, and we would have gotten more wokeness. So,
Got one more super chat?
Okay, one more super chat. This is Bishop, $10 from Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. Very kind. He says, God bless you all. Grew up a dispensational Baptist, speaking of Zionists, and I found Joel on Ruslan. All right, that's been a minute. And can say that I'm married now. I've got a boy on the way coming in April.
Praise the Lord.
And he will grow up to conquer the world as a post-mill Christian. That's
Amen.
Awesome. Praise God.
Bring him to the conference and we can baptize him.
Yeah, well,
not you.
Somebody will baptize him. Yeah, Isker will baptize. We've got enough Presbyterians, and Anglicans also at this.
Honey, I need you to hurry up. We got to get this boy to Texas.
Baptized.
Oh my
Presbyterian, Anglican.
You have your pick of the litter. There's so many infant
Do it twice
baptism
at the
choices.
conference and once in 3 years.
It'd be great. You could have the Catholic.
3 is better than 1.
You could have the Presbyterian, the Anglican. There'd be so many options. But here's the problem. He says April, and I don't know if he's talking about. I mean, it'd have to be coming quick.
Yeah.
Quick. Speaking of people having babies and coming to our conference,
Brian Sylvain's back.
The baby just came. I fully expect. 48 hours with the family, and I fully expect that Brian Sylvain will be at the conference.
This is not kid number 2. This is kid number 7.
This is kid number. At a certain point, they walk out.
Lexi's probably doing dishes already.
The baby's probably doing dishes. At a certain point, it's your 7th kid. It is a girl after all. So I think she's with mom doing dishes in the kitchen, and Brian is free to come to the conference. We'll see him. We'll see you there, Brian. Thanks. Okay, any other questions that we have, Nathan? Was that all of them? No more super chats. Oh, here's one more. NJ, I'm going to give this to Dominic. He says, why are you so sure that far leftism is defeated, that woke world won, or woke war won is what he means, was actually handedly won, that we won that fight, woke war won. Also, many political channels act like the Dems are defeated, but they still seem very strong, but they just lost the latest battle. I'm just going to say this. I think they're very loud. I don't think they're very strong. Dominic, what do you think?
Well, I think the insidious and evil nature of some of the things that guide the far left's decisions and their actions, they're certainly not going to go away. I just think that, very unfortunately, a lot of the things and the motives in this country are fueled by profitability. And I think that most of these major corporations simply just have abandoned, at least outwardly espousing some of those beliefs simply because they're just not popular and they're not profitable. So I don't think that it's all the way dead. And I think it's very important to always remember what can happen when you just let, self-will run riot. So it's not that they're to be ignored, but 3 months after this election victory, we've got kind of a decent amount of time until there's going to be another left-right political battle. So I think it's just sort of more important to sort of sign this victory certificate with this Trump win and to actually try to push some of these things that we hold near and dear to our hearts forward so that we can really actually have a true American and Christian victory. So no, I don't think that they should be discounted. I don't think they should be underestimated, but I do think that now it's a sort of small minority that's very loud. You're seeing elements of kind of like extremism with some of this Tesla stuff, and you're seeing some swattings, and the loud minority is certainly not going to go quietly, but I do think they are on their heels. But again, don't give them a break. Don't think they don't exist, but yeah, I think right now, though, we need to focus more on correcting things in the right wing.
Right. I agree. All right. Well, Dominic, thanks for coming on the show. How can our listeners follow you? I follow you on X. You want to give your handle real quick?
Sure. D. Michael Tripi, Tripi. Follow me on X. I do mostly news. I do throw some pretty based commentary out there, if I must say my
You do. You do.
And honestly, I just really want to thank you guys for having me on the show. What an intelligent, thoughtful, effective communicating group of men. And I really feel blessed and privileged to be part of your guys' show. And honestly, very unfortunately, my mother's brother died about a month ago that was a military veteran. So and he lives out of town. So we had a memorial that was actually scheduled like almost an entire month after his death. But if it wasn't for that, this Friday, I would actually be coming to the conference. And I look forward to shaking your guys' hands. Thanks so much for having me on.
Someday.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And I was going to ask you, I was hoping that you could come, but I'm sorry for your loss, and we totally understand. So again, that's at DM Tripi, Tripi. Follow Dominic on X. Thanks for coming on the show, man. God bless you and everything that you're doing. And one last time for the listeners, don't delay. It's happening Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week. That's April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week, we've got Calvin Robinson, we've got Steve Dace, we've got Orrin McIntyre, we've got Eric Kahn, Dan Burkholder, Ben Garrett, Adi Robles, John Harris, Andrew Isker, who was just on Tucker Carlson today. That dropped. Andrew Isker's going to be there. CJ Engel, his co-host from Contra Mundum, he's going to be there. Who else do we have? Who am I forgetting?
Dusty.
We got Dusty Devers, the Christian Prince. He's got to work his way up a little higher, but he's a state senator in Oklahoma. So we've got the Deves. We also have David Reese.
Stephen Wolf, did you say?
We've got Stephen Wolf. Yep, Dr. Stephen Wolf. If I don't say doctor. In person, he's like, Joel, you're my friend. But publicly, he's like, you better say doctor. But we've got Dr. Stephen Wolf. He's the author of The Case for Christian Nationalism. So just an incredible all-star lineup. We're super excited. But you don't want to miss it. So you've got to go, because here's the deal. Will these things, we've got 7 main sessions and 3 panels. Will they eventually be made public? Yeah. I'm going to shoot you straight. Eventually, you'll get it. But when I say eventually, I'm talking months. It's going to take us at least a few weeks coming down from the conference. We're going to have a lot of things practically that we got to square away. And then what we're going to do, it'll probably be, 2, 3, 4 weeks after the conference that you'll see the first piece of content. And we're going to drop one piece of content, of which there are 10, per week. So you're talking, 3, 4 weeks before you even see the first, and then 10 weeks because there's 10 pieces of content. So you're talking easily, 3 months, 3.5, 4 months before you get all of it. So if you want to get it all ad-free, where you can binge watch it live as it's happening right away, then you need to go over and join us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. Patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. Sign up for the gold tier. Watch all the content. Binge watch it. You'll be blessed by it. And if it's breaking the bank, then watch everything and then go ahead and unsubscribe. No harm, no foul. Dominic, thanks again for coming on the show. And to all our listeners, we hope that we see many of you this week at the conference. And if not, we've got some pre-recorded content that we're excited about that'll be coming out for our regular Wednesday show. And then we're going to air one piece of the content live in the place of our Friday show, is what we've decided. And then Monday, we've got another piece of content for you guys, and then we'll be back live in person, I believe, next week on Wednesday. But we'll keep you busy with content. In between, we've got some stuff pre-recorded. We've got the one piece of content from the conference that we'll do on Friday for everybody who's listening, and we'll have a good time. God bless. Thanks for tuning in.